Imagine being told that you and 300 men must stand against an army so vast that ancient writers struggled even to count it. An army drawn from across an empire. An army that darkened the horizon. An army that believed no wall, no city, and no people could resist it. Would you run? Would you surrender? Or would you take your place in the line, knowing full well that dawn might be your last? In the year 480 B.C., at the mountain pass known as Thermopylae, King Leonidas and his 300 Spartan warriors chose their answer. They did not choose safety. They did not choose compromise. They chose duty, honor, and the cold certainty of sacrifice. When Xerxes, king of the Persians, demanded that the Greeks give up their weapons, Leonidas replied with words that would echo through the ages, "Come and take them." Those 4 words were not merely defiance. They were a declaration that free men would not bow, even before the greatest empire on earth. So what truly happened in that narrow, blood-soaked pass? How did so few stand against so many? And why has the name Thermopylae endured for more than 2,000 years? Let us go back to the hour when legend was written in steel and blood. A decade after Marathon, Persia returned to Greece with vengeance in its heart. The defeat that had embarrassed Darius the Great was not forgotten. It became an inheritance, passed on to his son, Xerxes, who prepared a second invasion on a scale far greater than the first. This was not a raid, nor a warning, nor a limited campaign. It was a full imperial onslaught. Historians today estimate the Persian force at around 200,000 to 300,000 soldiers, though ancient sources claimed numbers far beyond that. However exaggerated those old accounts may be, the reality was still terrifying. An army vast enough to crush entire kingdoms marched westward toward Greece. Faced with that danger, the Greek world reacted in a way it rarely had before. Long-divided city-states chose cooperation over rivalry and formed a defensive alliance. At its center stood Sparta, and upon King Leonidas fell the burden of resistance. But the force he commanded was tiny by comparison. Only about 7,000 allied Greeks. Against an army many times larger, a conventional battle would have been pure suicide. Leonidas understood that if he fought where Persia was strongest, the war would be over before it had truly begun. So he looked, not to numbers, but to the land. That land was Thermopylae, the hot gates. Its name came from the nearby hot springs, but its importance came from something far more valuable: its shape. Thermopylae was a narrow passage squeezed between cliff and sea, a place where the Persian war machine could not fully deploy its strength. Here, cavalry, the terror of open battle, was nearly worthless. Here, the countless ranks of the great king could not flow outward, surround, or overwhelm by scale. They would have to advance through a bottleneck, compressed into a killing ground where numbers mattered far less and discipline mattered far more. In choosing Thermopylae, Leonidas transformed a hopeless defense into a contest on terms the Greeks could endure. It was one of the clearest tactical decisions in military history. If the Persians could not be matched in size, they must be forced to fight in a place where size itself became a weakness. The army Xerxes brought into Greece was one of the most formidable forces the ancient world had ever seen. It was not a single people, but an imperial war machine assembled from across Asia: 50,000 light infantry, 20,000 archers, 30,000 cavalry, and the famed 10,000 immortals, the king's elite guard. In numbers, spectacle, and battlefield reputation, the Persians seemed nearly unstoppable. Yet, in the narrow violence of hand-to-hand fighting, they carried a dangerous disadvantage. Many Persian troops fought in lighter armor, with wicker shields and relatively short weapons, effective in mobile warfare, but far less reliable when pressed into a brutal frontal struggle at close range. Against them stood the most feared heavy infantry in Greece, the 300 Spartans, supported by about 7,000 allied troops. These Spartans were not militia. They were professional warriors in the deepest sense of the word, trained from childhood under the unforgiving discipline of the Spartan state. Their armor was heavy, their equipment designed for direct shock combat. Bronze cuirass, Corinthian helmet, massive round shield, and a spear longer than that of their opponents. Everything about the Spartan hoplite was built for one purpose: to stand firm and kill at close distance. When these men locked into the phalanx, they became something more than individual soldiers. They became a bronze barricade. Shield overlapped shield. Spears projected forward in rank after rank. There were no open gaps, no broken spaces, no weak seams to exploit. In open country, Persian cavalry might have swept around the Greek sides and unraveled the formation. But Thermopylae was not open country. It was a corridor of rock and sea, a pass so narrow that it stripped away Persia's greatest tactical advantages and turned the battlefield into a straight, crushing contest of endurance and killing power. In such a contest, the difference in equipment and discipline became fatal. Persian arrows struck bronze and glanced away. Persian spears could not reach before Spartan spears had already found flesh. And once the lines closed, lighter armor and looser fighting style became liabilities. At Thermopylae, quantity was forced into a place where quality ruled. And in that narrow pass, the bronze wall of the Greeks became a weapon that even Xerxes' vast host could not easily break. When the first light of day broke over Thermopylae, Xerxes believed the battle would be short. He had brought the greatest army in the world, and before him stood only a small Greek force trapped in a narrow pass. Confident in numbers alone, he ordered the assault. Persian infantry surged forward in mass after mass, expecting to overwhelm the defenders. But Thermopylae did not allow the Persians to fight as an empire of scale. It forced them to fight in a bottleneck, one compressed front at a time. There, the Greeks turned the pass into a slaughterhouse. Bronze shields absorbed the shock. 8-foot spears struck from behind that wall with lethal precision. Persian troops, lightly armored and short-ranged, found themselves dying before they could even bring full force to bear. The losses enraged Xerxes. Believing the answer must lie in superior quality rather than sheer numbers, he committed the Immortals, his elite 10,000-man guard, the most prestigious soldiers in the Persian Empire. These were men who had marched through kingdoms and shattered armies. Their name alone was meant to inspire fear. But in the narrow throat of Thermopylae, fear could not pierce bronze. The Immortals were forced into the same murderous corridor as the rest. There, they met not panic, but discipline. The Spartan line did not splinter. Leonidas did not yield. And so the Immortals, too, were thrown back, bloodied, and unable to break the Greek wall. By the second day, the battle had become a grim symbol of Persian frustration. The dead piled up so thickly that the pass itself seemed clogged with bodies. The empire kept sending men forward, and the Greeks kept killing them. Persian casualties mounted at a terrible pace. Among the fallen were Abrochams and Hyperanthes, brothers of the great king himself. What was meant to be an easy breakthrough was becoming an imperial humiliation. Murmurs of fear spread through the Persian army. The Spartans were beginning to seem less like men and more like an iron barrier placed there by fate itself. Then came the turn of treachery. A local man named Ephialtes approached the Persians with knowledge that would decide the battle. For reward and favor, he revealed a concealed mountain path leading behind the Greek position. It was the one weakness in Leonidas' defense, the route that could bypass the deadly front at the pass. Xerxes seized the chance at once. That night, Persian troops moved silently through the darkness along the hidden trail. And by dawn on the third day, they appeared in the rear of the Greek line. What Persian might had failed to break by force, betrayal had now undone. The moment Ephialtes' betrayal was confirmed, Leonidas knew the fate of Thermopylae had been sealed. The Greeks were no longer merely facing an army before them. They were now threatened from behind as well. If the entire allied force stayed, it would be encircled and annihilated. If all retreated together, the withdrawal might collapse into panic, leaving Greece with nothing but a massacre. Leonidas made the decision that would immortalize his name. He dismissed the main Greek force and sent them south, sparing them for the war that still lay ahead. Then he remained where he stood, joined by his 300 Spartans, the loyal 700 Thespians, and 900 Helots, who chose to share their fate. They did not stay to die quietly. They stayed to hold, to delay, and to make the Persians pay for every foot of blood-soaked ground. Once the final day began, the Spartans no longer fought as a barrier alone. Under Leonidas, they surged forward in violent counterattacks, smashing into Persian ranks with the fury of men who had already accepted death. Their spears, shields, and discipline turned the pass into a furnace of iron and flesh. What remained of the Greek force struck with such ferocity that even victory brought terror to the Persians. The struggle became more desperate with every moment. Persian troops closed from multiple directions, and the Greeks were gradually worn down by sheer numbers. Yet they did not yield. The Spartans fought in ever tighter circles, their line shrinking, their dead rising around them like walls. Each fallen warrior left another gap to be filled, and each survivor stepped into that place without hesitation. Then Leonidas himself was struck down. His death should have broken the defenders. Instead, it hardened them. The Persians rushed forward, eager to seize the king's body and drag it away as proof that Sparta had been humbled. But the Spartans answered with something fiercer than survival: loyalty beyond reason. They threw themselves into the struggle around Leonidas's body with almost unimaginable resolve, repelling Persian attempts again and again. Even with death pressing in from every side, they would not abandon their king. Not one man fled. Not one man surrendered. They fought until their stand became legend. Each sacrifice that changed the war Thermopylae ended in death, but not in failure. Leonidas and his small force could not stop the Persian invasion forever, yet their stand bought the one thing Greece desperately needed: time. Time for Athens to empty its streets. Time for the Allies to prepare. Time for a frightened and divided Greece to become something stronger than fear. By the time the Persians entered Athens, the city they expected to seize had already been abandoned. The people had slipped from their grasp, and the deeper result was even more important. Thermopylae transformed resistance into conviction. The death of the Spartans sent a message to every Greek city-state. Persia could be defied. Persia could be delayed. Persia could bleed. That spirit carried into the battles that followed. At Salamis, the Greek fleet destroyed Persian naval strength in one of the greatest sea battles of the ancient world. And at Plataea, the Greek alliance won the final land victory that forced Persia to abandon its campaign of conquest. The legacy of Thermopylae was only a few days long, yet its meaning outlived empires. It became the eternal image of men choosing duty over survival, law over fear, and honor over life itself. The battle remains a lesson not only in courage, but in the power of terrain, discipline, and resolve against overwhelming force. To remember the dead, the Greeks later raised a stone memorial at the pass. On it, they inscribed one of the most famous epitaphs in history. "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie." Those words endure because they capture the essence of the stand. Not conquest, not glory alone, but obedience, sacrifice, and a refusal to yield. The story of Leonidas and the 300 has endured for 25 centuries because it speaks to something deeper than victory. It speaks to the price of freedom and to the memory of those who paid it. What do you think of the Battle of Thermopylae? Was Leonidas the greatest warrior king of the ancient world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss our next historical deep dive. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.